All right, so Eric, go ahead and start with an intro and then you can get into things whenever you're ready.
Sure. My name is Eric Winkelspecht. I am currently working as a full stack developer. Um, I took a little while to think about what I wanted to talk to you all about and kind of come in here with some kind of presentation. I've opted not to do a PowerPoint or anything for this because I really wanted to come in here and just talk to you about the job search journey. I wanted to kind of go over what my experience was like, the things that I did, where I focused my efforts, what I thought helped me, and kind of mistakes I made along the way. And really, it's not a blueprint for success. There's no one way to kind of make that career change, right? I assume most of you are trying to move from something into development. So the career change is really hard to do, or get your first job in whatever you're trying to do, right? So just going to kind of talk through. We'll do about 30 minutes or so. And Callie, if you want to jump in with questions during this 30 minutes, if you want me to expand on some stuff, feel free. And then after that, we'll open it up and do a big Q&A session.
Thank you for saying that because literally every single speaker, I feel very terrible that I interrupt with questions the whole time through. And then I end, I'm like, was that rude of me? Was it not?
Mm,
So thank you for saying that because I will, whether you said it or not.
you're welcome. So to start off with, I let's kind of rewind to before I started with development. I had a long-term career with a company. I'm in New Jersey, a company here in New Jersey. They are a IT solutions provider, which basically means they work with businesses, schools, whoever, to do all of their like hardware, software, technology needs. I wasn't in a developer role. I went there after college doing like an inside sales position. And every 2 to 3 years, I would move up. I went to a management role, then a senior management role. I was asked to move to their warehouse and work on system design stuff there. Again, not from a development perspective, but from more of a managerial perspective. I was there for a total of 11 years and did a lot of work that I was very proud of, had a lot of really good experience, 8 years in managerial roles, did a lot of things that I felt very proud of. But toward the end of my tenure there, just wasn't really happy with the work I was doing anymore. Didn't really feel drawn to what I was doing, didn't want to continue doing that stuff. Uh, Got to the point where I just honestly didn't want to go in there anymore, couldn't be there day to day and quit. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have another source of income lined up. I was just ready to be done and I just left my job. Would not recommend that for folks who are trying to make a career change, but it was my decision. I did thankfully have a decent amount of money saved up, which was planned to be like house down payment money, ended up being career change money. So I thrived off of that for a while. Uh, and to give you the overall view, my process of starting to learn and self teach engineering or software development through getting a job took a period of 18 months. So under 2 years. I think 2 years is kind of around the maybe area that makes sense for a lot of folks. 1 to 2 years of doing that process and grinding to try to make it work. There's nobody that can tell you exactly how long it's going to take, but for me, it took 18 months. So during that time, what were the things that I was actually doing? Well, when I left my job in March of 2022, and I didn't have a plan. I just knew I wanted to get into some kind of technical work. I was thinking about going into software development for a few months before I left my job. I had actually interviewed at a boot camp. There's a school around me in different areas. They're pretty popular called Flatiron Boot Camp. So I had interviewed there, and I was at the point where they were like, "Cool, you're in. Just give us your money and pick a start date, and you can start the curriculum." But it was like $14,000 and their guarantees, I didn't feel super comfortable with what they were promising, as well as spending the money up front. I had looked at their curriculum and saw some resources online, like Udemy courses, things like that. And I was like, why not just do this myself versus pay the money for a school to maybe teach me these skills? So I opted to do the self-taught route, which
I love
very
that.
challenging. Go
How
ahead,
did
Callie.
you get the confidence to do that?
You know, I had when I first went to college after high school, went to a community college and started out as a computer science major. I did like maybe 2 semesters before I switched to exercise science and physiology. I was working as a personal trainer at the time. So I had some amount of background in coding. While I was at my previous career, I did some coding in VBA in Excel. So it's like script writing, right? I optimized and automated some reporting processes that we were doing, saved everybody a lot of time. So I was like, I could go and learn this stuff and figure this stuff out and use my resources. I feel pretty capable when it comes to learning technical skills, but I honestly just kind of jumped in and didn't really know what I was getting into or where I was going to go with it. So maybe it was a misinformed decision, but it was the one I made. So started off with Udemy courses, kind of just looked up through Google what popular courses were for a development path. The one I started out with was, I forget the exact name of it. It's like Web Dev Development Bootcamp. It was by Colt Steele, who I know he's a pretty popular developer in the Udemy space. It was from what I remember of the course, it was fine. The first half of the course was like going over some basics with JavaScript and eventually going into like the MERN stack. And then the entire back half of the course was a project. But the way the back half was lined out, it was like you kind of just follow along with coding a project. And I followed along and I, did the whole thing. And then I walked away from that course and I was like, great, I'm going to start building some stuff now. Because that was the advice at the end of the course was like, go build your own stuff. And I sat down to code something and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to do any of this. So it didn't really click with me. I didn't walk away from that particular Udemy course feeling good about what I had learned there. So then I did another Udemy course. And this was the Angela Yu course, which had a much better, in my opinion, process of learning, where she introduces a concept, then kind of gives you the practice assignment, then comes back and reviews. And I did that course. Walked away feeling a lot better. And then I had those 2 like Udemy certificates behind me. And I was like, great, I've got certificates. I can go find a job now. Not the case, right? Those things don't really mean a whole lot. So if you use Udemy courses, they're for your benefit and not for a certificate. But I knew walking away that I still had to go and like build stuff. That was kind of the goal, was get the skills and start building things. So I am not very creative when it comes to UI design, especially at that time. Didn't have any experience kind of working in it. So I didn't really know what to build. So I was just kind of looking around and being like, what projects can I even start with? I ended up finding Front End Mentor as a resource. So I see some of you nodding. If you're not familiar with Front End Mentor, frontendmentor.io, I believe, is the site. It's literally just they have UI designs for the projects. You can use anything you want to use to build them, right? They just kind of give you the layout and what the thing is supposed to do. And then you just have at it and build it with what you want to build. There's a free component. There's also a paid component to that where they give you different files that, in my opinion, the paid component is nice because the files are like Figma files. So you can actually see like dimensions on things. And it's a little easier to figure out what your like CSS should look like if you're doing vanilla CSS stuff. But that was kind of my main source of like, I just need to build stuff and learn by doing for a while. And I guess I was doing front-end mentor stuff and just building those kinds of projects for about 6 or so months in isolation, just by myself. I wasn't doing any public stuff yet. I was just building and building and building. And then eventually I started kind of going through the LinkedIn space and seeing developers on LinkedIn and started connecting with folks. So that was about 6 or 7 months into the self-taught process for me. And I learned about the concept of like being public on LinkedIn because it's going to help you find a job and help you get noticed, right? Which is kind of pretty generic advice, but is legitimate. You start doing things publicly, and even if you don't have an audience to begin with, or people aren't commenting or whatever, you do it consistently enough, you'll connect with people based on just who you are and what you're doing, and folks will start following, and you'll start kind of gaining some popularity, which is cool. But the goal is find a job, right? So even if you're connecting with people, if it's not helping you find a job, you still have to kind of go in a different direction there. So I was really thinking about the building in public aspect, because in my mind, I thought to myself, well, if I'm trying to find a job, and I knew at this point that it was going to be hard to find a job because I don't have actual experience in this world. I have 11 years of very different experience and things that can apply to being a good coworker and project management and things like that. But it wasn't direct development experience. So I wanted to be public with what I was doing. So I was posting about my projects on LinkedIn, but didn't really love that there wasn't like a concise area for things to live and people to really see what I was doing. So I started recording videos. Well, my first attempt was a Twitch stream. I tried one or two Twitch streams, but once I was on Twitch and live streaming, if I had to like Google something because I didn't know how to do it in code, my internet was just terrible. And I couldn't search for anything. So it crushed my productivity. So I was like, Twitch isn't for me, but let me try YouTube. So I would record myself coding projects, talking as I went along, kind of explaining what I was doing, why I was doing it. And then I would go back and edit those videos, which means I'm watching myself code. I'm listening to myself explain my code. And, not crazy edits, just cutting out some blank space where I would be thinking about how to solve a problem or whatever. And then I'd upload those things to YouTube and I'd share that on LinkedIn. I really think doing that process helped me out a lot because if you know about the job search or interviews, which we'll talk more about in a little bit, part of that process is going to be technical interviews. And you're probably going to be asked to do some kind of like live coding process. And if you're just sitting there thinking and not talking during a live coding process, it's not going to help you out in that interview setting, right? You have to be vocal. You have to explain yourself. You have to participate. So I got a lot of practice doing that. And I was able to evaluate myself in that process through the editing. So started doing that. LinkedIn was around October of 2022. YouTube was around November of 2022. So again, we're like a few months into this and just starting to get public with stuff. Around that time is when I also was trying to start doing some freelance stuff. I didn't really feel confident in my skills to do freelancing, but I was trying to do it anyway. Got one or two freelance gigs through Upwork, which I do not love Upwork. I do not recommend Upwork. But if it's your only resource, try Upwork. My problem with Upwork is that there's so much competition that folks tend to devalue their work. So it's a legitimate way to find work and to earn money while learning the skills and just build using the skills that you have. But you're not going to make much money, right? Because people go in there and they really, really just undersell what they can do. And folks try to find the cheapest rate, and that's what they're going to go with. So if you can luck out and find some stuff, cool. I think Upwork is good if that's your focus. If you just want to make a really big Upwork career, you can spend a lot of time there and probably do something big with it. But otherwise, it's, might be a time sink for you. I found some other freelancing gigs just through my personal network. Nothing crazy, but that tends to be where more people find freelancing opportunities, especially in the beginning. It's just people they know or friends of friends, family friends, whatever it might be. So we did some of that. Continued on the LinkedIn side with networking. I was reaching out to a lot of folks, a lot of developers, development managers, just asking for conversations. Wasn't asking for a job, was really just talking to them and sharing my story, sharing what I was doing and getting feedback and tips and pointers and really just trying to make connections with people that I could check in with later on, nothing too crazy. And then it was in January where I met my co-host, Matt. We started the podcast, Self-Taught Devs. So we have been doing that weekly since January of 2023, where we met up just through LinkedIn. He had a post about he was annoyed about tutorials and people kind of like recording the most optimal tutorial with no bugs and no anything. And I was like, yeah, I click with this. So we chatted for a bit and then we decided to make a podcast, which really was just to share our journey in doing the self-taught thing and trying to find a career path this way. And then around February, after doing job searching and having a bunch of different versions of my resume and sending things out, not getting a lot of responses and getting a lot of rejections, I decided to create my own opportunity, or try to anyway, by building my own SaaS, or software as a service, which really a SaaS is just kind of anything you think about now that has a paid component to it, right? That is software. So if you have an app and there's a paid component to it, cool, that's a SaaS, right? But calling it a SaaS just sounds a little bit better. that I'm building an app. Might sound a little more professional. So uh, in February is when I started building that. I had an idea for a project which I called We Should Watch, and it's up there. It's called We Should Watch.app if you ever want to check it out. Came from a personal problem, this idea. My girlfriend and I, we just had a list of movies we wanted to share with each other because, I've seen this movie she never has, and I want to share it with her because X, Y, and Z, or she has a movie she wants me to watch, and here's the reason why. And we had like a long Google Doc of just all these movies. And it was fine. But after a while, Google Doc is just hard to manage. And it's not very easy to understand what movie is what genre, if we're looking for a specific kind of movie. And my idea was, well, let me make an application that's not just like searching for movies, but allows you to make groups. And you can invite people to your groups, and you can add movies or TV shows to this group. You can have a chat on these movies. So you can, like, if you're not watching in the same house, you can have a live chat as you're watching together, whatever it is, right? So I started building that in February. And honestly, it was a really great experience for me overall. It was a several month long project. I still go back and I make updates and tweaks to it. But I guess I was working on that basically from February up until I got a job offer, which was in September. So you can kind of figure out how long that process of working on it was. And it really stretched my limitations as a developer. And it taught me a lot because I went through the process of not just building a project, but emulating what a real world workflow would be, which means like I was using GitHub issues to track different features I wanted to add or bugs I needed to fix, using branch creation. So I had feature branches that I would merge back in, do my own code reviews. All of those steps along the way really just prepared me for what an actual job would be. And I treated it like a full-time job, right? Because at this point, since I quit that previous job, I wasn't working. So I would get up, code basically like a 9 to 5, either spend time coding, spend time networking, spend time applying to jobs, et cetera, et cetera. But the project and why it was so helpful was like, I had never built anything like this before. I'd never built a project with Stripe integration. I had never built a project with a relational database, actually. I was always using MongoDB.
Did
Callie?
you have a memory leak when you integrated Stripe? Because I'm pretty sure Stripe killed my website.
Thankfully not. It all went very smoothly for me. I was using.
She's been trying to help me all week.
I was using Next.js for this project too, which was, the new launch of Next.js 13 or whatever it was at the time. So that was new to learn. Had never done like Twilio integration with SendGrid, right? So the process of making a group, hitting a button to send an email to somebody, generating a link for them to go click on to join your group, like all this stuff was new to me. And it really emulates the job experience because you have a project that you have features you need to implement that are not things you've solved for before. So you need to go figure out how to do those things. That's the job of being a software developer, right? Yeah. Maybe you have some patterns or things you kind of can plug into. Maybe you have some things you can lean on, but like you're developing custom solutions to business needs. That's how I treated this whole project.
Did you get users at any point and kind of like,
yes.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Tell me more.
Yeah. So I had a bunch of users sign up. To be honest, nobody paid for it, which was fine because I have a free component where you can make a group and invite people, whatever. And if you sign up, it's like $2 a month or whatever I'm charging for it. Then you can have as many groups as you want and you get access to the chat feature. So I didn't want to make it like too restrictive, right? Because I wanted people to go check it out. People signed up, gave me feedback, which was really cool. But mainly this was like let me make a project that could, if I really put the effort into it, turn out to be something big. But primarily my goal was I'm going to use this on my resume and I'm going to list this as my current position because I am a developer at We Should Watch, right? Whether it's my own entrepreneurship app, whatever, doesn't matter. But what got me attention in getting interviews from my resume was the fact that I had a developer position on there. Once I get in there, then I can explain that the app is my own creation, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody really seemed to care at that point because they had gone and looked at the code and looked at my YouTube channel from that and seen videos that I had done. They looked at my LinkedIn and saw my posts and things that I had been talking about. And that got me more into the door more frequently because I had an actual resume that highlighted real experience and not like project experience, which was my first few resume versions. Uh, and then I guess the last part of this, because I'm already at the almost half hour mark here for us, DSA was a big portion too for me, which was really, it came about through going through interviews and kind of understanding where I was bad at the interview process, right? So once I had We Should Watch as a experience point on my resume, I'll take a step back and say I've had quite a few versions of my resume, right? It's really challenging when you're writing a resume coming from a previous career, not to lean on that career very heavily, right? My first couple of versions of my resume were like, here are my Udemy certifications that I got. Here are some projects that I worked on and my portfolio. And here's all my 11 years of previous experience at this other company that you probably don't care about, but here's why I think it matters. Those things don't get you attention when it comes to finding a developer job, right? Some folks will say you can spin that into why it matters. Maybe you can. But when you're talking about just submitting a resume, when your paper needs to compare with hundreds of other papers that somebody's looking at, if your only experience is unrelated experience and then like some personal projects, it's not really going to stand out, right? Which is why I wanted to build something that was legitimate, that could be a entrepreneurship venture, that I could list as a legitimate position for myself.
I love that.
So
I
yeah,
think it's you can, once you get into an interview, I think that's where you can tie in like these are all the transferable skills.
mhm,
But I totally agree. Like you can't just put your resume that like, oh, I worked at a grocery store and then expect the
right,
recruiter to be like, oh, this person is going to be a great developer, you know,
right.
you need to get
And
that
the
time.
and the things that made it stand out more was when I listed the position, I didn't list just things like, uh, closing tickets, coding tickets, whatever that kind of stuff is. I listed features that I was implementing in the application, right? Which is more impressive when you can tell somebody like, okay, I set up a group chat feature, a live chat feature for each individual piece of media in this group. Cool. That's really interesting to talk about. How did you do that from a coding perspective? What tools did you use? How did you manage your database? How are you managing authentication? Like all of those things come into play. And it's a much more interesting conversation than like, look at this invoicing application I made from Front End Mentor, which was what my previous resumes kind of looked like. So
Where
those things get you in the door. Go ahead, Callie.
do you feel like you got to the point? Because I feel like I see a lot of people doing like movie app, right? Where like they're getting an API where they're like, you type in a movie and then the movies come up and then they
Mhm.
quit after the movie list or like the to-do list, right? If you do a simple list. Whereas like, I feel like if you just do the CRUD application, like you're not doing the learning. At what point in your We Should Watch application did you feel like you were in depth in that where like the learning really started where you weren't doing just like another CRUD application?
For me, it's weird to think about because my stages of learning and where I really feel like I was just like, oh, I can focus on what really matters was when I actually moved away from trying to do all of my own UI stuff and I moved into using, I was using Material UI for We Should Watch.
All right.
Because the first large portion of me trying to learn software development was how do I do all the CSS stuff and make things look the way they're supposed to look? And I spent a lot of time there. But once I moved into, well, I don't have to worry about how to make a modal because I've done it a couple of times already. I don't have to worry about how to make these boxes look the way I want them to look. I can focus on business logic, let's call it, right? And when you talk about the CRUD app process, I think for me, like really diving in and saying like, how do I know I'm doing more than just a basic CRUD app here is when you start to get into number one, can you actually give this application to somebody in a real world setting? And can they use it to solve an actual problem? Or are they just using it to see that you can put an application together?
I love that.
Because like if you are like, even if you're doing some kind of, I know you guys just did like the to-do list, like a spin on the to-do list and advanced to-do list stuff, right? You
Mhm.
can make to-do list applications, but if you can add additional features that don't exist in some other applications or use it to solve a problem that you have, and set it up in a way that you can just give that app to somebody. They can sign up, they can make their own accounts, they can have their own data that exists permanently that they can go then make adjustments on and all that stuff. Like that's where the CRUD stuff, the advanced CRUD stuff really comes into play. And it's more than just like your basic tutorial kind of stuff.
Okay, I love that. That's great advice.
Yeah. I mentioned DSA quickly. I want to go back to that because I didn't really finish my point there. But I had, before I received my offer, over the period of, I guess, the latter half of this whole thing, so let's call it 9 months, but more like the last 6 or so months, I had interviews with, I think it was like 9 or 10 different companies. All but one was cold applying. So like resumes can get you in the door if you do them correctly. I had gone through a number of those interviews, did multi-stages in each of them, did projects for them, did live coding interviews for them, right? The first time I did a live coding session, I was super nervous. I got through it with a lot of help from the gentleman who was like giving the interview. But after that experience, I was like, man, I need to buckle down on just what this is, and eventually kind of turn to the DSA side of things. Tried Leak Code in the beginning, struggled terribly. I was so discouraged when I tried to do Leak Code stuff because Leak Code isn't a space for learning. Leak Code is a space to practice Leak Code, and that's really all it's for. If you really want to understand DSA, there's a lot of better resources to get started. I'm a big fan of Structy, structy.net. It is a paid resource. There are a few free courses on there, but it's find a resource for data structures and algorithms that really clicks with you, that explains the concepts and the whys and helps you kind of visualize data better. Really, the visualization is a huge thing with that. So I'll wrap up by saying for this portion, the job actually landed was through networking on LinkedIn. I had seen somebody that I was following post about a position with their company. I had never spoken to this person before. I reached out and said, hey, I'm interested. I like the stuff that you post. I'd love to apply and take my shot at the job. And he just kind of, responded. It was just like, hey, cool, man. Awesome. Good luck. And then I think it was like the next day I posted a YouTube video that was a tutorial for CanStack query, or you might know it as React query. I didn't do a lot of tutorial videos, but they saw this video and then kind of went through the rabbit hole of the other stuff that I was doing. And I guess, were very impressed by the stuff that they saw and made the referral for me. So he was like, hey, referred you to this job. I really think you're really awesome at what you're doing. You'll get in contact, or my manager's going to get in contact with you. And then, you'll go through the next steps. So after that, had my interviews, got the offer, was elated because at this point in the process, my personal savings were running very low. The stress was very, very high. It was to the point where I was also looking for other jobs in my area just to get something, because you can't just kind of let yourself run into financial ruin, right? You kind of have to keep that going. So thankfully, didn't have to get another position and made that whole thing work out. So I want to do a real quick wrap up because I know I just kind of laid out my whole experience in sort of a good timeline. Maybe it was a little confusing, but I want some big takeaways for you guys of what I felt was the right stuff in my experience. Number one, the real big takeaway that I think everybody hopefully can walk away with is what's really going to help you in finding your first position as a developer. Technical proficiency, there's just no way around it. You have to have the skills to do the job, and a backlog of evidence. Meaning if someone looks at your resume, your portfolio, your LinkedIn, anything, they need to be able to see who you are, what you're about, what you can do without even talking to you. I love having YouTube videos up as an option because it gives your personality. You can talk during them, hopefully fluently, right? Projects are good, but if you can explain your code to somebody without having to schedule a call with them, like, man, that's super helpful. The way you get to technical proficiency, in my opinion, narrow your focus to broaden your understanding. Like, don't language hop a whole bunch. Don't framework hop a whole bunch. Find some things that click with you and stick with them. The longer you can spend with a certain language or a certain framework or whatever, the more comfortable you're going to get with those tools, the bigger and more complex problems you can solve with those tools. If you hop around too much, you'll have a surface level understanding of everything. But a development team is going to need you to be able to be independent and provide value very quickly. And if you can't dig in and solve problems with the tools that they're not going to find the benefit, and they're not going to want to take a chance on you. So work those bigger projects as soon as you can, treat it like a full-time job, implement features that users would request, try to make up some things that are challenging and go tackle those challenges. So be public, build your evidence, whatever that means for you. If it's YouTube, if it's Twitch, if it's, LinkedIn, something that you're comfortable doing and can do sustainably in the long term, build as much evidence as you can. Do the DSA stuff. Like I said, leak code, probably not really where you're going to end up spending your time, but do things that help you understand like how to work with arrays, how to work with objects correctly, what those things mean when they're in memory, what references are to those things. You can get into stuff like working with trees and graphs and stuff like that. And those will definitely help you develop some patterns on things. But from my experience, I've only had 1 or 2 problems that I used an actual DSA technique on, and the rest, hasn't really been applicable, but it will still help you understand what you can do with your languages more efficiently. So it's worth spending time there. JavaScript versus TypeScript for me, I think, is a big one. I like TypeScript. I think that also just helps with understanding of what data means in your application. JavaScript is cool, can be a little bit faster, maybe, but once you start typing things out and have static typing for you, so you can really understand like, what are my data types? What do my objects look like? How, when I'm passing data back and forth, what matters and what doesn't? For me, and I think for a lot of other folks out there, TypeScript can make that click a little bit better and a little more quickly. And the last thing I'll say, which I kind of harped on a bit, but I'll kick it again, represent your work as work, especially on a resume. Don't lie necessarily, if you're going to take a leap and try to make a business venture, which I didn't talk about the legality and user acceptance terms and things like that, which is something you need to consider, and taxes, but making an opportunity for yourself and making it an actual job and having that as a job listing on your resume is definitely something that's going to get you more attention. It's going to help you be more competitive with other developers in the field. Use that to your advantage if you can comfortably and legitimately do something like that. Again, don't lie, don't do something that's not ethically appropriate for you, but you have to find the ways to stand out amongst the crowd because it is a very populated area. There's so many bootcamp graduates who are trying to make the change, and there's a lot of folks who are applying to positions that are underqualified for those positions, even though they don't necessarily realize it or don't understand why. So it's a flood of folks you're trying to compete with, and you have to do all the things that you can do to stand out. All right, I'm going to stop. I'm going to shut up. I'm done talking, and I want to answer questions because I think that's going to be more valuable to everybody on the call as well.
I do have one while you
All
look
right.
at questions. But what is the biggest thing that you notice now that you are getting paid for your work and you're working on bigger code bases and such? What's the difference between kind of what you were doing before as a developer and what you're doing now, if there is any difference?
So working on, I am in a really nice position where I'm getting to develop a new application. So I'm starting, got to start my own code base and do it kind of the way that I wanted to do it. And also at the same time, working on legacy code bases. So if you've never seen anyone else's code, if you've never taken time to read someone else's code, make sure you do that. It is a very, very specific skill that you need to have because you need to be able to work with what other people have already done and build on top of it. And also, you need to know what bad code looks like because you're going to work with a lot of bad code, right? I think I'm glad that I handled kind of my time the way I handled it, treating coding sort of like a 9 to 5 before I even got my job. Because when you actually work as a developer and you're not trying to split your time between networking and coding and working on your resume and building your skills, there are days that just feel like coding marathons. And that can be very, very exhausting. It's still fun. I love what I'm doing. I have fun with it every single day. But there are definitely days where at the end of the day, I'm like, why am I so tired? Oh, because I used a lot of brain power solving a lot of challenging technical problems today. The other thing I'll say about it too is like when you're building your own projects, you have the benefit of deciding what you're going to build, which could also mean you might be able to take it a little bit easier on yourself when it comes to the features that you're going to implement and do things that you're comfortable building. Try not to do that, because when you're working at an actual company or wherever, working on a code base with an actual user base of, thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, and a request comes in of something you need to build, it might not be something you know how to do. In fact, it's probably going to be something you don't know how to do. Your job is to understand the code base you're working with and solve problems, build custom solutions to business problems. So the more you can expose yourself to different things and find solutions to them, even if they're like quote unquote bad solutions because you don't have the tool sets necessarily to build super optimal code, challenge yourself to build solutions to those things, because it's only going to help you get better at researching and understanding, and go back and look at your old solutions and fix them, right? Because it's just you got to build that skill set over time.
All right. So can you hear me first?
Yes.
All
Yes.
right, sweet. I do have a few hundred questions, but I'll try to limit it to just one. I kind of have the inverse path of you, where I went to coding boot camp and got a job as a developer. Due to some circumstances, I needed to leave. Now I'm going to school for my associates, but also trying to build a better skill set, try to get back into that practice of working with a team and going through the entire process of product requirements and etc. But I'm having it hard finding it hard because there's a lot of noise out there right now, and I'm having difficulty cutting through it and figuring out where I need to focus on my skill set. How did you get through that portion?
So I want to make sure I understand your question, because the lead in there kind of sounded like teamwork stuff, but you're asking just specifically how I identified my weaknesses in the processes?
That, and like I'm trying to continue my learning outside of school, but I find that there's YouTube tutorials. You went through Udemy, you gave us 2 new websites. I'm going through another website. There's a lot of noise out there of how to code, etc. How do you cut through that noise and focus on just building a skill set out of one thing?
Okay. Sure. Look, there's tons of advice out there. There's tons of folks on LinkedIn who are going to appear to be an authority. That's why I preface this up front by saying this is not a blueprint. This is my experience, and I want you guys to just take inspiration from this and turn it into your own stuff. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of folks who are saying you should do X, Y, and Z specific things, and they'll guarantee you a job or whatever. That stuff's kind of crazy. There are a lot of general things you can be doing, right? The things that always help are like build projects, network, DSA practice stuff, right? Like apply, whether it's resume or coffee chats, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to building your actual like technical proficiency and skill, how do you focus and really build that stuff out? For me, I had to take a hard look at what stuff I enjoyed doing, which is why like when I started with Leet Code, I was like, this is not for me. I remember trying to do some Leet Code problems because everybody was saying, you got to do Leet Code. If you're going to do interviews and you're going to be good in interviews, you got to be good at Leet Code. You have to solve X number of Leet Code problems before you should even apply, like that crazy stuff. I remember sitting in this spot at this computer, trying to do Leet Code stuff and being so frustrated. And I just hated it. I didn't understand how to find solutions correctly. I kept hitting errors. I remember, I forget, like I had like a sweatshirt in my hand or something and threw it against the wall, which is just like my absolute, like, I'm so frustrated. And my girlfriend like took me aside and just kind of talked me down from it at the time. But it made me realize like, that's not sustainable. When you're going to do something like this, when you pursue a career in software development, you're going to continue to learn stuff forever, right? You're never going to know everything. You're going to get really good at the stuff you spend the most time with, but then you should also continue to build those skills and get better at other stuff, right? You have to continue to evolve, to be competitive, to be valuable, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to really find the things that felt the best to me, even if they didn't seem like they were paying off short term. Like building that We Should Watch project, spent months on that thing for no real promise, right? Nothing was like official that it would lead me anywhere. It was just like, I'm having fun doing this. I know I'm building my skills because I'm building things I've never built before. That makes sense to me because I think people could actually use this thing. And I was learning from it and I was having fun. So I would continue to divert away. I would try a bunch of different things along the way, right? Always experiment, try some things that you think might be good, you think make sense to you. But if it really doesn't click, and if it's not motivating you to continue, if it's not valuable to you in multiple ways, move away, find those things that really work for you and spend your time there. Hopefully that helps and sort of answers that question. It's tough, man. There's a lot to go through, but good luck.
There's so many different, like, I feel like boot camps all are like pretty much web development, right? And then kind of focusing more on the front end. There are so many different realms you can go into, which David's going to talk about specializing here in a few weeks, right? So I think it doesn't, like, just because something as everybody else is doing, like, you don't have to do it too. Like, I love the advice of like, figure out like how you like to spend your time and develop that. Like, Christine wanted to make custom CSS for everything. I don't like front end development. Sorry, David. You know what I mean? But like, so like figure out where your niche is, figure out what you enjoy doing. And like, if it's a movie app, like go nuts, make your movie app, spend months doing it. And like, you're gonna learn. But yeah, I mean, I never leak coded in my life and done just fine. So
Yeah.
if you want to leak code, then go for it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, this is such a long-term process. And like, you have to set your expectations appropriately and understand that like finding a job in this space is very hard, and it has been very hard for a long time. The folks who have been in it for years and give advice have no idea what they're talking about at this point because they're not in touch with the current state of the market and current competition. What they have said, or what they continue to say, is valuable on its own and provides some amount of merit, but like always take that stuff with a grain of salt, you know? But set yourself up for the long-term process, which also means like you might have to take breaks every now and again. You know, you can't do this stuff day in, day out and just grind forever and feel good about it long-term that way. You know, you got to take time and take breaks, and whatever it takes to make it sustainable for you, you have to try to implement those practices. The whole front end, back end thing too. I don't, you know, specializing. I don't have a good opinion on that. For me, it was full stack, and I felt that I was valuable in that realm and could provide the most value on both ends and like try to be competitive across the world, like across the stack. Finding my first opportunity. I don't know how that's going to work for me long term if I'm going to end up specializing and going more one direction or the other. I've heard folks say that, you know, start full stack and then narrow down as your career progresses, start narrow and then get larger as your career progresses. Everybody's going to say everything, and everything has merit. You know, you got to find the places where you shine and where you can really spend your time and be valuable. You know, when you get hired onto a team, they need somebody that can get up and running as quickly as possible. So the more time or more proof you can show that like, I can go into a code base and start being active and start doing things, like that's how people are going to trust that you can actually get in there and help them out with what they need you to do. And if that means you're super valuable on front end or back end or both, show it, you know, build that proof and show that evidence.
Brian, does this help? Do you feel like, what kind of things do you feel like would be sustainable for you? Like, are there ideas coming to you as Eric's talking?
Oh yeah, I'm constantly full of ideas. It's my ADHD nature. It just one after another. Especially because I think right now in this market, especially, companies tend to follow a trend of, React front end developer role that they want you to be highly proficient in that framework, or .NET or their Microsoft shop. And it's really tough to not it's tough to be in this position where I have a little experience in .NET, and I know enough about REST APIs, a little bit about SQL databases, and a little bit of Angular front ends. That specific stack is not used everywhere. And in my previous position, even going back to the legacy code, it was ASP Classic, which is, you've never truly lived and you've tried to read legacy ASP Classic code. It's really fun. But I think what's really gotten me frustrated is that there are things I want to learn very passionately. Like, I really love data. I love data. I love things like Python and data analytics, but I can't pivot there right now because I'm trying to find a job. And I could build a project out in Django or something, but it might not be applicable to a lot of roles. So it's also frustrating because the market's flooded with a lot of senior devs that are probably snapping up a lot of junior roles just to get something. So a lot of it is, I definitely need to sit down, focus, and start building projects. It's just like I also have to highly focus on finding that job right now with what I have.
Yeah, it's tough to look at job postings and not feel like you have to go learn every single thing under the sun because they're all on everything, right? And you've seen all the memes and stuff where it's like, here's the giant list of requirements they want you to have, and then once you get into the role, it's like, build this button. It's like, all right, whatever. So it's really tough to maintain that focus. I would say if you have the capability of building something really impressive with technology that you are comfortable with, that you can build a big, cool project with, and that can be your lead in, regardless of what those technologies are, languages have their own syntax, right? And there's differences, but that kind of doesn't matter completely if you can show that you've got a really great understanding of how to code, right, in the tools that you have, and that you can build something that is a real world application that can mirror something. Like, you're not going to build an enterprise level code base, right? Those things are gigantic. But if you can build something that is real world applicable, that you could potentially have a user base with because it's out there and live and people can access it and potentially pay for it and whatever. If you have some of the technologies that a company is looking for, and maybe they have some others they would like you to have that you don't know, if you've shown that you've got the technical skill set to build something impressive, and you show that you've got the ability to learn new stuff very quickly, you're going to be competitive, right? You don't have to show up and be a master in every single thing they're looking for, because you also just need to prove, like, can I build stuff? Can I make things work correctly? Can I explain to you why I'm making these decisions? Can I show my technical proficiency? And can I show you my personality, right? Can you trust me that I'm going to be a good teammate? Do I have any kind of, evidence that I can speak well, that I can collaborate well, all that other stuff? So what you might lack in technical skill on what this job posting has, find your other ways to make up for that. Find your ways to be competitive there, and try not to get distracted and go and feel like you have to build everything in every technology and have experience in it all, because that's not going to be realistic, especially if you're saying, like, got to find a job pretty quickly, need to be competitive pretty quickly. Learning takes a really long time. Building stuff takes a long time too, but you could probably do that more quickly than learn a whole bunch of new technologies and build stuff in all of it.
Yeah. I would say too, like, what are you at the, like, Eric made a project and made it his full-time job, right? So, like, what language or framework or idea or project would you want to invest a lot of time into? Because that is going to get you farther quicker than oh, well, this job that they might not even see my resume for has this tech stack. I'm not super pumped to write a project in it. You know what I mean? Like, find a project that you're excited to spend 10 hours coding and you don't notice the time is passing, you miss a meeting. You know what I mean? Find that level of excitement about something. And I think the job will come, and that's probably naive of me to say as well, but I just think, I don't know, like that I feel like is a better use of time, and you're probably going to enjoy your time more than like chasing this never ending list of requirements. Like just throw the requirements out the wall.
Yeah. I had to look it up because I know it's a quote, but it's from a Roman philosopher, Seneca. The quote is, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." You know, you're not going to be able to prepare for the job that is available right now. You're not going to be able to prepare for the job that is, in your inbox today from whatever, website you signed up with that's sending you open job postings. But what you can do is build your evidence and prepare your technical proficiency for what you think might be available in the future. And eventually, if you've got enough evidence and enough skill behind you, and you spend your time networking and applying, hopefully, because no one can tell you that it's definitely going to happen, but the goal is that it will come along and the opportunity is going to show up that you are prepared for, right? So again, can't stress enough that make this thing sustainable long term. So if you've got to do something else in the in between while you're looking for that technical job, yeah, buckle down and do that too, right? Because maybe that has to happen, but continue to build that skill set, build those projects, and show that you're worth it, regardless of all those other potential things that might be on that job posting.
Oh, absolutely. I found opportunities to build some cool things, possibly. Who knows? But income needs to happen so I can pay my bills.
Income needs to happen.
So I definitely might get a role that's not technically software dev, but it's close enough. My question is, I guess, I don't have a savings to fall back on. How did you cover the costs of hosting or accessing a cloud service like Google Cloud or Azure or something?
So for We Should Watch, I was using Supabase. Still, I'm using Supabase and using their free tier and not paying for it until I have to pay for it. So there's a lot of free resources you can find out there. Take advantage of those things. Because honestly, you show somebody that application you have working, you can talk about the technology later on, the decisions and stuff. Like Supabase is a backend as a service, right? But you're still setting up things in a relational database. You're not making all those little bits of things happen. Like they have, I was able to set up my chat application because they have like the alert notifications that go out. You can have a subscription through the Supabase library that you use on, in JS. I wouldn't have set up a WebSocket on my own at that point in time to set that thing up, right? So I use technologies and libraries that were available to make something impressive. Is it cheating? No. Technology's out there, right? But you build something really cool. And hopefully as cheap as you possibly can. I paid for the domain, which I think was like $12 a month or something like that. I bought ericwink.dev for my portfolio, which was like $15 a month or something, as cheap or a year, sorry, $15 and $12 a year. So like invest as little as you can if you don't have that savings, there's a lot of free educational resources out there too. If you don't have the money, don't spend the money.
I didn't deploy anything for my first job search. I just built in public on LinkedIn and I just screen recorded what was happening in my app every single time. And like that landed me quite a few interviews. And then during the interview, I would just screen share and we'd go through the app and then I'd open up my code base. So like there's ways of getting around having it deployed that you can use. Like you can take pictures, you can record your video, you could go through each feature, record you walking through the feature, put it on YouTube, you know what I mean? And like all of that would be a free thing, but still get you publicity. Obviously, if you want to have users on your site and kind of actually build a business, that'd be a different thing, but hopefully your idea sells and your users can cover your costs somewhat soon.
And get a hoodie. You gotta have your hood up if you're a real developer, right?
I don't own a sweatshirt with a hood. I feel
What
like
are you doing, Callie?
my first time I felt imposter syndrome this week.
Oh, here it comes. There you go.
Yes,
That's how you know.
hired.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? This has been a lot of fun.
I just joined, but I have a question.
Hit us.
So my question is basically this. I really appreciated what you said about like the tech stack that they ask you for when you're applying for a job. So currently, one thing that has been kind of like a problem for me is that bachelor's. I know that most tech jobs are looking for someone that at least has a bachelor's degree. I'm in the process of getting my bachelor's. I don't have it yet. So my situation, I know everyone says, oh, just show your technical skill and you'll be able to bypass that. But some jobs make it an absolute requirement, like do not even bother if you don't have a bachelor's. Don't waste your time. So how do you overcome that? Like, what can you do? What are the jobs? No one ever says what are the jobs that you could show your skill and that can override having a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, that's tough. I know you're right. There's definitely companies out there that require some level of a college degree, whether that means associates, bachelor's, whatever. Sometimes they don't even care what it's in, right? They're just like, if you have a bachelor's, you have a better shot. You can come talk to us. If not, get out. That's kind of crazy. You know, I have a bachelor's degree in management, and I don't use it at all. I didn't use it when I was a manager. I have a lot of thoughts on the education system, especially in America, but whatever. I think when it comes to being competitive or finding jobs where that's not a requirement, you know, you got to be specific in that search if all you're trying to do is find a job that you can send a resume to. Otherwise, you're probably better off making connections and talking to people. You know, when you can get referrals, not all the time, but sometimes when you get a referral, it's stronger than whatever a company's potential requirement on a job listing might be. You know, if they say you need a specific bachelor's degree or whatever, if you're getting a referral, you're probably going to get in the door and have a conversation with somebody anyway and have that interview and move through that process. Not, you know, not definitely, but it's probably going to be a better opportunity or give you better chance at having an opportunity if you can make connections with folks. The networking side of things is hard and it's intimidating, and it's not a short-term process either. You know, you can't expect to have a call with somebody and in that same call get a referral. I have done it once or twice, not on purpose, but you know, sometimes you click really well and people like you and they're like, you know what, we do have an opening and I want to have you kind of go through the process. But try to make connections with folks that are in the industries that you're interested in. You know, if it's like, you know, medical technology or wherever, you know, spend time making those connections, building relationships, checking in with folks, you know, once a month or every other month and having conversations and building an actual legitimate relationship where hopefully you can provide some amount of value to that person, whether even if it's just something like, hey, I saw you posted a thing and it really, you know, really hit me hard. And I wanted to say thank you for posting that thing, whatever. And you're not out there just asking for favors. Over time, that person gets to know you and see what you're all about and see your technical skill set. That's where your technical skill set can come into play and make up for that lack of a degree and hopefully get you in the door.
Okay, thank you. I really, really appreciate that. I mean,
Good
I
luck.
do have an associate's, but I don't have, that's why I'm going back to school now. It's been very brutal.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Requirements are weird. Jobs will post for their unicorn developer, right? You're going to see tons and tons of weird stuff. Even if it says it needs a bachelor's and you don't have a bachelor's, it doesn't hurt you to apply. The worst that will happen is that you will get rejected. The best that will happen is that you'll get a call for some reason, right? And they'll overlook that point. So take your shot. Don't let it completely dissuade you from sending in a resume if that's what you're going to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eric. This has been really great. It's been fun to chat and super insightful. And Brian, I hope this helped. But yeah, thank you, Eric. And we will see you guys, I guess, again next week on Thursday. I don't remember who our next speaker is, but I'll figure it out and email you about it.
If anybody wants to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think Callie posted and kind of added me on there. If you're interested in podcasts, you can check out the Self-Taught Devs podcast. we do that every week. We have guests on, and either in the field or folks that are also on their learning journey trying to find their jobs. And we try to do as much good stuff as we can on that. So check us out.
Hey,
Thanks,
can I
Eric.
give a quick comment?